2020 or 2021, when they had a tough year. In the last little while, Nikon purchased red. That's going to be expensive, and is doing development and R&D in red. That's going to be expensive. Now, the margin for the year ending March 26 has been 5.8%. And in this financial year, Nikon sold almost 1 million cameras, 910,000 units. They are predicting camera sales of 900,000, so just a drop of 10,000 for the current financial year that we are in. As for lenses, 1.3 million lenses sold. So that continues to show us that there are about 1.4 lenses sold per body that's sold, which is really quite interesting, isn't it? Nikon suggests that they have 12.9% of the market of bodies sold and 12% of the market of lenses sold. Now, Nikon's made it clear in their annual report, and I'd just like to read this statement verbatim. The 2026 to 2030 mid-term plan is to stimulate demand for upgrade and additional lens purchases suited to customers through stronger application offerings and one-to-one marketing. Further, they want to leverage Red's network and sales channels in the cinema industry to rebuild the Nikon brand as a cinema camera manufacturer. Further to that, strengthen proposals focused on enhanced core performance and emotional value, including heritage-inspired design. What they're saying there is what we talked about on this channel just a month or two ago, and they're actually putting it in black and white here in the annual report. And that is, they want to leverage their heritage and include heritage-inspired designs. We did get this rumor recently that Nikon was going to be working on a range finder, perhaps fixed lens style camera. A lot of people think that's an absolutely fantastic idea. I would like to see that, plus also a camera which has detachable lenses. Really, Nikon could make anything in this space and it would be popular. I've just spent today at a Fuji convention here in Melbourne and seen that, yes, the retro-inspired cameras that Fuji create are well loved. And Nikon, I think, won't go wrong with creating retro-inspired cameras. This is not a rumor anymore. This is real. This is in Nikon's financial annual report that they will be creating further retro-inspired products. I would say absolutely yes, we're getting something. We just don't know exactly what it is, but it probably is going to end up being pretty close to what that rumor is. This is the 26 to 30 plan, so it could happen anytime. The fact that there's a rumor out there says to me it might be sooner rather than later. Rumors don't usually go longer than a year unless something goes wrong in production. Very exciting to see that not only do we have the ZFC, the ZF, but something else is coming, and a retro range finder style camera, either a fixed lens or non-fixed lens, and so glad that we're actually seeing Nikon telegraph this in their annual report. Now, the other part of that statement is, of course, core performance, and that means making the performance of these cameras just better than they are today. Now, another thing that we're expecting in the next 12 months and potentially in this financial year that is covered by this financial report, and that would be the Z9 II. I really would, at the latest, expect to see the Z9 II either the final quarter of this financial year, which is January to March next year, and maybe it might fall in the start of the following year. Who knows? But I really think we can't be much more than a year or so away from this product. It says here, enhance core performance. Well, that is exactly what the X3000 will be all about. It will be about giving us, already they gave us so much in the X3000, but that chip is now essentially 5 years old, and when this new chip ships, it will be over 5 years old. I expect a big jump in performance, and the reality is we're seeing that from the latest Sony processor, their Bions 2. It's a very impressive processor. I expect nothing less from the X3000, and I think when they say here enhance enhanced core performance. That is exactly what they mean. Now, the other part of this statement is strengthen the product portfolio and support diversifying customers. In the Z Cinema series, enhance system value through digital cinema camera development that combines the strengths of Nikon and Red and add lenses. So there's quite a few things that we can read into that. Strengthen the product portfolio and support diversifying customers. That says to me, if they're contemplating a high-end APS-C cameras, we'll get that out because that will support birders and action photographers. They will love it. Nikon's obviously got the best glass in class to support that, and we know that a lens like the 120 to 300 with the teleconverter, it's 420 mils at f4 when you throw that teleconverter, and you multiply that by 1.5, which is what an APS-C cropped sensor would be, a D500 style replacement camera. It might be 26 megapixels because there's a great sensor that exists in the Fuji X-H2S, which is a fully stacked 26 megapixel APS-C sensor. It's a high quality sensor. You can push that density further, but ultimately there's a trade-off of noise performance versus pixels. In real terms, going from 26 to 33 is only going to get you something, I think, around 500 pixels on the long edge. It's really quite negligible. And
create a note after your light adjustment section. Go to RGB mixer. I'll explain it as I go. First, green output. Turn on auto normalize. This keeps your white balance stable as we mix channels. Also enable preserve luminance so brightness stays consistent. Now watch this. Increase blue in the green output. This is the part most people don't even know exists. What's happening here is that we're blending color channels together. Blues and greens start shifting towards cyan. Yellows and reds start leaning towards orange. And just from this, look at the image. The palette already feels more cohesive. This move, blue into green, is a classic film style adjustment to mimic Fuji or Kodak film stocks. The more blue you add, the more compressed and stylized the image becomes. But now look at the skin tone. It's getting a bit too red, so we correct that. Add some red into the green output and gently rotate the hue back until the skin looks natural again. Now compare the before and after. The image feels tighter, more focused, less random. We can push this further. Go to blue output. Turn on auto normalize again. Increase green. Then reduce red slightly to balance the overall hue. Now look at the factor scope. The color distribution is even tighter, more compressed. And look at the image. The blues are warmer and those magenta patches in the skin are cleaned up. Skin tones look more flattering, and this becomes your new foundation. From here, you can bring back level 3 color toning and level 2 color hierarchy and refine everything on top of this. Just keep an eye on skin tones. Our eyes are extremely sensitive to them. Every small shift can feel off, so adjust carefully. If you're using the studio version of DaVinci Resolve, you have access to a few more tools that can really elevate the image. This is all about texture and finishing. I won't go too deep here, but I'll show you my current note placements. Right after your first color space transform, add noise reduction, just enough to clean up luminance and color noise. Then, after building your look, you can start adding texture, bloom or glow to soften the light. Halation to add the subtle reddish edge around highlights. If needed, you can add sharpening, but personally, my Sony footage is already too sharp, so I usually go the other way and soften it slightly to reduce that digital edge. I also use lens blur to blur out the edges of the frame. And finally, film grain. This ties everything together and adds a more organic feel. None of this is required, but if you want that final layer of polish, this is where it comes from. We've covered a lot, so let's simplify it. First, we normalize the image. Then, we fix the light. We balance exposure, shape contrast, and control where the viewer looks. Next, we shape color. First, we compress it to build a cohesive base. Then, we tone it to add separation and mood. And at the very end, we polish. So if you understand this workflow, you don't need LUTs, you don't need plugins. Got questions or you want to practice with my footage? Just let me know in the comments. We've got a lot more to explore and I'll see you in the next one. If you only rely on LUTs or plugins to get your look, you're missing most of the process. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a high-end color grade from scratch. No LUTs, no plugins, using only native tools in DaVinci Resolve. We're going level by level. Each stage unlocks a new layer of control. Light, color, tone, and finally, full look development. By the end, you won't be guessing anymore. You know exactly why every adjustment works. So level 1, let's fix the light. At this level, we're only focusing on one thing, light. We want the highlights, midtones, and shadows to sit in the right place, so nothing is clipped, nothing is crushed, and everything feels balanced. This is especially important if you don't have perfect lighting on set, because here's the thing, if your light is off, your color will never look right. Now watch this. By adjusting light alone, without touching saturation, we can already bring back color. And to show this properly, I shot this in Hong Kong. Busy streets, messy lighting, constantly changing conditions. By the way, if you want to practice with this footage, just let me know in the comments. Let's break this down. This shot was filmed in S-Log3, so first we normalize it. All this step does is convert what the camera captured into a proper viewing space, Rec. 709, the standard for web and video. That gives us a clean starting point. Make sure Apply Forward OOTF is enabled so the image looks natural on screen. If you're already shooting Rec. 709, you can just skip this. Since I'm working with log footage, I place it into DaVinci Wide Gamut first. This gives us more room to work before bringing it back to Rec. 709. Now bring up the waveform. Turn off Colorize, because at this level, we're only looking at luminance. This shot is bright, harsh, and washed out. So what we're gonna do is compress the tonal range and recover the image. Create a note for overall light adjustment. I'm using the HDR color wheels, set to DaVinci Wide Gamut. If you're working in Rec. 709, use the primaries, but only adjust the luminance sliders. Right now there's too much highlight, so I bring it down. Lower the light and lift the shadow slightly. These adjustments can be subtle or aggressive. It depends on the image, but the goal is always the same. Push the light into the right tonal zone. Now it looks flat. That's expected. We'll fix that in a moment. Next issue, white balance. There's a slight warm tint, so we create a separate note for color balance. There's an effective and accurate method for both standard and log workflow. Switch your balance notes gamma to linear and use the gain wheel for balancing. They give you controlled, precise adjustments across the entire image. Here I'm just pulling it back slightly to neutralize the color bias. Now let's bring back contrast, but with control. Create a new note and go to custom curves. If you're on the studio version, you can switch to HDR mode for finer control. Select the Y channel only because we're still working purely in luminance. Switch the histogram to output so you can see the changes in real time. To build contrast properly, we need a pivot. Think of this as your anchor point, the middle gray. It is the midpoint between black and white, and where your camera naturally balances exposure. In DaVinci Wide Gamut, that sits as 0.336. In Rec. 709, it's 0.435. Once you lock that in, you shape around it. To find it precisely in the free version, create a node and disable all the other nodes. Turn contrast and saturation down to 0. Set the pivot to 0.336. Then go to curves and check the waveform. The spike you see, that's your pivot. Pin it. Reset contrast and saturation. Turn your nodes back on. Now we've built contrast. Enable editable splines. Then go to waveform settings. First, switch to data level in scopes. Then set soft boundaries for reference as it shows on screen. These are just guidelines to avoid clipping or crushing. For this shot, I bring the highlights down, lift the shadows, and shape the curve around the pivot to control the midtones. And now, the image has depth again. And the true color starts to come. Create another node. Go to luminosity versus saturation. If we zoom in, the lanterns look a bit flat, almost plastic, so we're going to reshape it. To make colors feel richer, we reduce saturation in the shadows and highlights, and let the midtones carry the weight. This is what I call the hero zone. Start with the shadows. Click on the lower range and bring it down. Then slowly adjust the transition until it feels smooth. Now look at the lanterns. They instantly have more depth. The colors feel layered, not flat, not digital. This behavior is actually very similar to how film responds to color. Now we do the same for highlight, but more gently. I prefer a much softer roll-off here, so the highlights don't feel harsh or digital. And just from this, your image already starts to move away from that digital look, even before we touch on any stylization. Let's quickly look at another example. In this street scene, there's a lot going on, many competing colors. This time, instead of hue versus saturation, I used color slice. This tool feels more filmic in how it behaves. You can control hue, saturation, and density within specific color ranges. Here, yellow isn't important, so I reduce it. The greenish sign scaffolding is distracting, so I lower the saturation and increase the density. And for the red taxi, just a small boost to bring it forward. Then again, I apply luminosity versus saturation to shape the depth of these colors. Now the image feels much more controlled and much more nuanced. If we want to go even further, we can clean things up surgically. Create a layer node. Use a qualifier to isolate the concrete road. There's a slight yellow tint here, so I remove just that. Now, is this necessary? Not always, but I want you to see what's possible. So at level 2, we're not adding more color, we're organizing it. We're deciding what matters and what doesn't. Make sure you're comfortable with level 1 and level 2, because from here on, we start building actual looks. Alright, this is where we start creating looks. Up until now, everything we've done has been about control. Now we start shaping style. We begin with color toning, also known as split toning. This is where we apply different color tints to different tone zones, often with contrasting colors. As a matter of fact, this is one way to get the classic teal and orange look, where shadows lean towards teal and skin tones sit in warmer tones. But of course, color grading is much more than that. At a higher level, we use color toning to do 3 things. First, create color contrast. Second, guide attention to the subject. And third, shape the mood of the scene. Take a look at this example. This was taken at a street food vendor. This image is already color corrected. It looks fine, but it doesn't say much. So let's enhance it. Before we start, turn off the targeted colored adjustments from level 2. We'll bring them back later. Create a note after your light adjustment session. For this, we'll use a combination of color wheels and lock wheels, so we get a smooth and natural transition between tonal zones. Our goal here is simple: Make the subject stand out. Bring up your factor scope. Set it to mid so we can focus on midtones. Start with the gamma wheel. Set the Luma Mix slider to 0 so your color adjustments won't affect the brightness of the image. Now gently push it toward a warm tone. Be subtle here. These controls are very sensitive. For this image, I'm keeping it close to center for a more natural feel. Now we create separation. Add a new note. Switch to lock wheels. Change the factor scope view to low. In the shadows, push slightly toward teal. Again, keep it subtle. Then adjust the shadow range to control how much of that tint affects the midtones. Now look at the before and after. The subject immediately stands out. Next, we refine the highlights. Switch the factor scope to high. In the highlight wheel, add a slight warm tint, just enough to move from pure white to a softer creamy white. Then adjust the range for a smooth transition. It's a very small change, but it adds a lot of polish. At this point, the image has direction. Now you can do your level 2 color refinement adjustments. But as you can see, just from this technique alone, you can create many different looks. But we're not done yet. Let's polish it further. This is where soft clip comes in. Soft clip is a simple but powerful way to shape your highlights roll off and soften shadows. It's often used for that slightly milky shadow look. I have mixed feelings about it, but it's very common in modern grading. Create a note after your color adjustment. Go to custom curves and find soft clip. Start with shadows. Bring up the waveform and turn off color. First, set your low threshold. Then adjust low soft to control how much you compress the shadows. Be careful here, you still want to preserve detail. Now highlight. Here I'm more generous. I prefer a soft roll-off, so I increase the highlight compression until it feels smooth. And now, the image feels more refined. And if you think this is powerful, level 4 takes it even further. Okay, this is the final level, the boss level. Up until now, we've been shaping light and organizing color. Now we're going to remap color itself. This is called color compression or gamut compression. In level 1, we compressed light. Now we're compressing color. Instead of spreading colors across the entire spectrum, we start pulling them closer together, so the palette feels more cohesive and more unified. And for this, we use one of the most powerful tools in DaVinci Resolve, the RGB mixer. In here, we will use a technique called RGB crosstalk, where information from one color channel is mixed into another. This is where things get a bit abstract. So instead of over-explaining it, let me simply show you. Take a look at this image. It looks fine. The light is balanced, contrast is good, everything is technically correct. But it feels plain and dull. If you look at the factor scope, the colors are a little bit scattered. There's no clear direction, so let's fix that. Create a note after your light adjustment section. Go to RGB Mixer.